Okay. Hello, everybody. It is tomorrow's Somatic Education for Youngsters, a group that Florian and I started, and we have Cassie and Alicia with us here today. And Florian, do we sort of have an agenda today that we were going to talk about?
Which is interesting. I think there was a reason why we wanted to get together after our actual third meeting, which was supposed to be more about like open questions and deciding if this group wants to continue working or if we have some concrete plans. And if I remember right, we wanted to think about a program which we could like just like to see what could be an approach to work like with a group of the age is not decided yet. And with Malaya, there was actually, because she is in the Philippines, there was this idea, because we are quite international here already, to also see if we, when the lockdown allows it or the situation allows it again, are giving it a trial to like do each of us the same concept with the same group of like age group and see if there's any significant differences in our experience, because there is this massive discussion, exploration about cultural somatics out there. And I think which would be certainly interesting in an early age with people, because society and culture might not have absorbed them too much yet, you know? Yeah, so this is one idea that's in the room. And correct me if there was a second one. Or maybe Alicia, you've been with us a couple of times. Maybe you can say what brought you here. What would you like to continue working on?
Yeah, so I was definitely on board with the idea of trying out to create a program, something that when the time allows it, that we're able to go and try it with our own clients and those own unique age groups. So one of the things that brought me here is I currently work with families, but by working with families, it also means I'm spending a lot of time with their children and really noticing that sense of disconnection. And something that brought me here was the idea that it can be hard to just be out there trying to do it in your own unique way that differs from traditional early childhood development models. So I really wanted to connect with other practitioners about that too. And that's definitely been interesting as well.
And some of the things that we have like established as being sort of the most important are family and community buy-in with the project, and providing a safe or a courageous space where people can feel comfortable. And I think that with that, there's a sort of requirement of some kind of consistency or commitment. Anything else that you guys remember that have been the sort of important things to lay down?
One last thing that I wanted to add is that like we also have this string open, which was about like how do we communicate the worth of our work to caregivers, and in the best case in a preventive explorative session, and not in a fix my kid or it's too late nothing else worked way, because there is so much resilience building that can be done throughout somatic education and somatic movement. And yeah, which is also just an important thing. How do we tell a parent, send your kid here instead of XYZ? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that that also points to something that you had talked about in the very beginning, which was language and languaging for body or embodiment or just touch and movement, how important like the development of that is, as it's really not even a concept in most people's world. So, yeah.
Would be like maybe starting with this concept a little. So me speaking about my work with teenagers, and just like how they approached me or how I approached them. Maybe all of us can briefly say like how did the first contact start with the groups we work with, and for me it was just about my own activism in queer rights, that I just got requested by people saying like, hey, don't you do this work? And I'm like, you somatics, do you mean? And then they already said, yeah, this work. You know, we saw your homepage, and like, but for people, it's even hard to rephrase what we are explaining on our pages or what we are describing in our course descriptions because it seems to be so transcendent for them, but still there is a wish or a call for it. And so yeah, via my own activism, then I got connected to groups which are especially working with teenagers in trouble and in need of some education, prevention, attention, even only. This is how I started engaging with this group. And so I didn't promote it to the outside world saying like, hey, come to me. I was more or less asked to do it. What was your experiences?
So yeah, I'll just go really quick. So for me, usually I am asked to work with other people, but it's usually short spurts, or it's within theater or dance. And then I'm working with groups in the interest of performance and using somatic tools to develop their own connection to themselves in order to have more variety, more of a palette to play with, and also just more resource. So, and coming into schools or into universities or wherever to work with people in movement, which usually in my work, it's usually also dance related. But I feel like the somatic tools, like how can we feel it into our bodies if we can't, how can we dance if we can't feel our bodies, you know? Alicia, and then Cassie.
So for me, my first experiences was being asked for school to do an anti-bullying program. Previously, I worked on a conference here called Together We're Better, which is for, I guess, I'm trying to put it in American terms, but it's like middle school age students, so 11, 12, 13-year-olds in Canada, grade 6, 7, 8. And they are basically people who have been nominated by their teachers, seen as leaders, seen as folks who can contribute to diversity and inclusion. And because of that work, I just started running an anti-bullying program um, for kindergarten and grade 1 students, so 5 and 6-year-olds. And that really pushed me into working in public funded programs and something that really speaks to the way you approach parents who it's almost at the point of parents who really wish better for their child but feel as though they can't give it to them, so they're accessing these services because they can't afford X, Y, and Z. And something that really spoke to me in communicating with the parents through that work was not always treating them like, oh, your child has to be here, or, you're only here because X, Y, Z. It was always having a conversation with them like, hey, your child is really, excelling in this. What if would you be interested in checking out this with me? Or, maybe we could get the funds to purchase this for your child and talk to them about things that they can do in home that don't require supplies. And that actually really was my first unofficial introduction into somatic, was being like, how can they use their body to create, to move, to explore? And yeah, I know what some of those kids are doing today. And it's just led me into this weird parallel journey of being really focused into that work for a long time, but now stopping and now really getting to work with families and their children. By default, it's an absolutely different communication when you're being paid and someone's actively choosing to work with you. And I think that's something to differentiate is I need to be really clear about what the benefits are and why we're doing this. And when people have that why for me, they're like, okay, you know what? I trust you. I trust the research. Let's do it. And I find that's what helps. Sorry, that was a little long.
No, that's really good. And I also feel like that's going to help us in like delineating, like we need to have like this is what we're trying to do. This is what we hope to do. And this is what it will do or could do. These are like the reasons. Cassie, do you want to talk a little bit about your work and what your awareness within this idiom?
Yeah. I mean, I don't really consider myself a somatics teacher. I'm still learning a lot. But I do try to integrate a lot of like sensory awareness and mindful bodiness. I teach more dance technique and choreography and composition, but through that, trying to layer in all this deep understanding of sensing what's happening instead of just seeing and repeating and redoing. Because I think that those things were really absent in my own training and practices, growing up. until I was an adult, I guess. So approaching that from the technique, and a couple of things that I'm curious about as I'm hearing. I'm really curious about the entry point in accessing this for all these youngsters. And, you know, like I've witnessed Laura a lot. She comes and teaches my students, and I've also witnessed her, you know, teaching other groups. But that entry to access that and get them engaged and willing to participate, I think is really astounding to see. And how do we access that, especially in different populations and in different, I don't know what, I know Florian, you said teenagers, but Alicia, I'm not sure what age groups, and I'm sure all of you are working across the board with multiple age groups. And then another thought that just came up for me is, you know, you're talking about getting the families involved. So I'm curious about how that shifts and changes when there's a lot of involvement and support from whoever's bringing them into the space. And then also when there's a total absence of that, how to still manage that access and ability to bring everybody into the same space, even if there's different stuff, even if there's different people or maybe not anybody bringing them into the space. So how to access that with or without the underlying support of whomever.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think Florian has dealt with that in dealing with a lot of his queer kids that don't even have a family that's in any way supporting them.
Yeah, it's like maybe just to paraphrase this, it's like one of the main problems currently in Poland is that only every 8th father and every 5th mother, by the statistics, is supporting a queer child at all. That means like most of the children, when making the decisions to openly or by mistake get just like caught, you know, or like their homosexuality, bisexuality, transsexuality gets revealed without them warning it, it mostly means that they will have to leave their homes because of the society having so much pressure on the family, parents losing their jobs, which just leads to the fact that they are living with other like constellations that are just like taking in the role of a caregiver, although they might be just 2 years older, you know, and that's the situation we're facing in Poland at the moment. Thank you, Cassie, for all you brought in also. And Alicia, you mentioned the point of that one of your first contacts was via the work of bullying prevention or intervention when there was bullying going on. In my perception, this is like also a big interest of mine out of a practical reason, because making the work accessible. In Germany, I'm pretty sure it will bring the possibility to get funding for such a kind of work. And just looking on the long run and also being like financially a bit shredded after COVID and another lockdown, which might be prolonged for like 1 more month here in Germany. They're just discussing it as we're speaking, or lovely Miss Merkel. But it looks like there's another month of like no possibility of working in the field. So I think, and maybe you could tell me, just like also if we don't go for this approach, what is a good age to intervene when bullying is getting a topic? I would say 5 to 10.
Yeah,
maybe.
very young.
Yeah, 5 to 8 maybe even.
Yeah, I mean, you can start as young as 2.5 because the publicly funded programs I worked at with you had 2.5 to 5, and then I don't know why they skipped the 6-year-olds, but to the 6, depending on where they were at emotionally and their ability to regulate. Sometimes they'd be with the younger group, sometimes they'd be with the older group, and then we had 7 to 11. And when you start intervening with a 2.5 with the 2.5, it actually starts with getting them to do group work and being aware themselves. So when like they knock over or they throw paint at someone else, we talk about like, what does that mean? Like, how would the other person feel? And getting them to start putting themselves in someone else's shoes. Yes, they might not be at the age for moral reasoning, but they start to understand that the other person feels bad and they get to choose how they respond. So we don't say like, you need to go apologize, you need to give a hug, you need to do anything. They usually decide on their own, like to say, I'm sorry, or give their friend a hug, or help their friend with something later, or sit with them at snack time. And it was really great to see by doing something so small and asking them how they feel about it and how they would feel if it happened to them. It opens up doors. And I think that's the start of bullying intervention. But then at 5 and 6, you can move on to things like using books, using the body, acting things out, movement. So yeah, I think the younger, the better, even before they start school.
Yeah, well, like, I was just speaking about, because I'm thinking which way I could approach groups, and I or like approach caregivers with the idea. And here in Berlin, there's like a pretty big queer sports association. You don't have to be queer to be part of it, but it's like especially like welcoming for trans inter people, you know. And also like let's say rainbow parents, like couples with children, and especially for these kind of children, I think an extra portion of resilience against bullying could not be of harm. And I know the people from the association pretty well, so if I put together a program, and I have an CMA here in Berlin, which would actually join me probably for the project. Jenny, much love to you if you see the recording after. That we could approach this sports association and say like, hey, can you just like get this out to your members, that if they want to send their kids to like a somatic movement education class about resilience, with the background of like possible bullies and so on, I think I could get a group together very easily, which I could then implement, try out with. Yeah. So would you
Yeah.
see, would this also be, sorry, just like one more question to Cassie, would this be what you mean as an entry point also, Cassie?
Yeah, I mean that, and then I suppose I'm also thinking about the actual structure of how you approach it when you're in the space with the people. And it certainly is different for everybody, but I'm interested in maybe hearing if you're thinking about collecting those ideas from everyone in the group. Like it seems like, you know, Alicia, I'm just trying to imagine you in the space with, you know, 2.5 or 7-year-olds. I mean, that is such an interesting idea for me, of like a research data collection of how each person in their different population, in their different space with their different age groups is actually like entering the physical, verbal, somatic work with the groups, and what successes are happening and maybe why, and trying to analyze what that means. I don't know if that's the direction that we're talking about, but I'm just, you know,
I think that's
just jumping in and trying to think.
Yeah. I think that's part of, I feel like with the idea of putting together a program, I feel like we would have some, these are the tools that we're going to use in the program. Like we're going to spend some time with these different things, which of course is going to have some flexibility because obviously you have to be in the moment with whatever you're doing. But I feel like that would be, here are the resources and the tools. Like this is an exercise. And just to talk about two things. One thing I wanted to ask you, because something that me and Cassie noticed, which was really interesting, was I've come and worked with her kids like consecutively, fairly regularly in the years. So some of them get to see me twice, and she's working with high school age students, groups of 9th and 10th graders, and then 10th and 11th graders. And she sees them all year round. So they're having consistent training in dance. And what we noticed, which was very interesting, was that a lot of them had a much bigger buy-in on Zoom than they did in the room. And I think that that's part of like their capacity to have privacy to do some of the exercises. But not to say it wasn't successful when I was there, but it was definitely super successful for these kids who are all Zoom schooling, which is just way too much for most of them. That's one thing. And then the other thing I wanted to say, and this is sort of what Florian was talking about, and I think this is where we need to start seeing how do we fit it into our community. So I've been talking, like I've just started to join in with the Kingston Arts and Culture people, and talking about getting more relationship between the artists and the education system. So just seeing ways in, like how could I apply this program where I am now, and who are the partner organizations that are going to help me put this thing together, because I think that's another part of the entry point, is like getting the structure around to find people that are going to do this, or somebody that's going to be willing to give it a shot. And we may have several models, because there might be something really young for, like, this is the 2 to 6 year olds or whatever, keep them in there, the 2 to 5s or whatever. And then we have like the tweens and then the teens, or, you know, who knows? And what's different? I mean, I think that's another thing to think about. All right, that's all.
If I make like speaking about the difference here, the already mentioned Susan Bauer with her book The Embodied Teen, which I know about, is one of her sayings is that she actually starts after all the research she did, and she said that she started working with teenagers because a lot of what we are talking about, like this playfulness, this exploration, all of this, also the authenticity is there in children up to a certain age. And then when the teenage years kick in and you want to be cool and you want to be accepted, you want to be like a leader, you start bullying others maybe. Or basically expectations of society are changing this and they're putting you in a form of expectations or a picture that you want to fulfill. And that's why she decided working with teenagers. I think from my own interest, coming from really my core at the moment, I would say I'm very interested in like 5 to 8, maybe, or like, let's say 6 to 10, something like this, because it's also like kind of for me like a step going from like what I kind of already have experience with, not into an absolute new field. And I think this is also the group of young people that I could arrive or I could reach via my approach that I was just speaking about. Don't know what is your first feeling when you think about like designing something for a certain group? What age would you like to focus on?
I mean, I don't know about for everyone else, but here in the school board realm, the kindergarten and grade 1 are a little bit easier to get to. They still send things home. They provide more updates. There's just a need for services, and parents at that time having a little bit more of a hyper focus. So I've always found that's usually the easiest group for me to reach, whether it's going through educators I know, whether it's going through colleagues, whether it's going through other community programs that are currently in existence, where this is a really easy way to make a transference over. So that's what I think my entry point would be. And I really see it as being something that can be on my end because of the way my business works. It's social enterprise. So I know there's some stuff that's coming up in May that would be able to cover the cost of me exploring this and doing doing whatever comes out of it, as being something that's really effective and an offering that's available and really accessible for that age range and for their parents too.
I'm certainly interested in the young ones, but I find it so challenging to work with the little ones that I'd rather actually find some success with the teens, preteens and teens. So I think maybe even 10 or 11 up to 15, 16 would be good for me. But I am open to kids, especially if there's structure and form that I can feel like I can sink my teeth into.
And Cassie, you already have the group of high school students, it is, right?
Yeah, I'm teenagers. I don't really have much access to young ones, but.
So a couple of questions arose for me, just thinking in terms of structure, like, so saying that we are sort of starting to think about putting this thing together in a few different ways, and probably it's going to be different for different groups. You know, a 5-year-old is going to have a different attention span than a 15-year-old, maybe a better one. So what do you think, what kind of structure are we thinking would be the best? Like a couple of hours a week, or you know, or a shorter, more intensive thing, or I mean, I think we had talked about like maybe a month long something, but what do we think would work the best? And I think there might be different, like, I don't know, I'm open to doing stuff on Zoom too. But it is nice to be in a space. I feel like this need, since so many people are on Zoom all the time.
Although I love day workshops, but especially in the construct we are talking about, I think it would be also a bit more interesting to see the progress and the integration. That's why my initial idea would have been to do like maybe like 90 minutes once a week for 4 weeks, just like as a tryout, you know. Maybe by the fourth week, there's not a single child wanting to come anymore, you know, which could happen. Or maybe by week 4, they all bring their friends and their siblings, and people just say like, "Can you please continue with this?" Yeah. So, and I think 4 weeks is a good time to dip into this a little bit. Yeah. And for me, because you mentioned Zoom, Laura, I'd be like almost be open. I just never had the experience in Zooming with somebody under the age of 12, to be honest. Yeah.
I think with little kids, it might be different. Yeah. I think that, yeah, that's maybe a teenage thing. Although, oh my God, little kids are in school on Zoom now.
Yeah.
Yeah, Alicia, have you been online with any of the young ones?
It is fun. I mean, to watch where their focus goes, I actually feel like what Laura was saying, like they're more comfortable, they're in their home. Yes, they're distracted, and that's why I make the sessions 2 hours, because you know there's going to be like, let me show you my cat, let me show you my favorite doll, let me show you my bed. And they're so excited. And yes, sometimes you see up their nostrils, but like we have, I have a form that's been pre-made, and it has some like Zoom etiquette rules for their parents that they can go over with their kid, just to be like, you know, like how to set up the camera, how to make sure your child is comfortable. And I find that really helpful. I mean, I always make sure I put up like a really fun background, or if I'm working with a specific kid, like making sure they're able to do the same and just really feel comfortable in their environment. But they have fun. I mean, they get to move around, they're not confined to their space. Like, I don't know if you've ever been in a gym with like 30 kids, but you always have to do the thing where like make sure you're not hitting anyone, you have enough personal space. You don't have to do that. They're in their own home, they can be as free as they want to, and they don't particularly have to worry about anyone else intruding in their bubble. And I think that's what they like about it. But I'll have more feedback. I'm doing a bunch of things 14th, 15th. So I'll let you know next time we meet if it works with a big group.
And maybe also considering that this lockdown in all our countries might be continuing, it might be a chance that some parents are really happy if somebody is taking over their precious for like 2 hours, you know, yeah, with something new for them. Because like I will actually look a bit into if I find any offers that are currently happening on Zoom in my surrounding, and I'll ask a couple of people who also do work with youngsters if there is some offer, because it might be actually a big chance. And if they like it, they might want to come to the studio then, or to the gym, or to like wherever the actual course is going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to just point somebody out. Ellie Crowther, she did the embodiment conference. She's in England, and she does a class called Intergenerational Family Dance. And I was her person to present. Like I worked, whatever, I pre-recorded it. So was part of the session with her. And I have to say, like, her method, she was working with families in person first, but then on Zoom afterwards. And I really highly recommend watching that. It's in the embodiment, Ellie Crowther, ELLYCROTHER. Just her approach to getting them engaged, and also what ended up happening, like how the families became much closer, and like they're getting that physical touch from each other, which especially in England, people don't tend to be the most warm people there. So like I mean, the kids and the adults were having like these contact improvs in the living room with, you know, balloons and different things. Really successful. Obviously, that is a layer of buy-in that a whole family needs to have. But the whole family was participating in some of these rooms with like, and people who weren't dancers in the first place were like, oh, I wanted the kids to move more, so I started doing this, and then I started dancing, and you know, and they have this totally new relationship with each other. Where I feel like, you know, in historically communities danced together, right? In even in Europe, not just in Africa or, you know, South America, but even in Europe, like people had their country dance and that's what they did, you know? So I feel like, not that it always went on, but that aspect of community building through movement together is like such a huge one. And rhythm. So moving and rhythm, it like builds relationship. Or you can even think of the military, going for a march. We're all doing the exact same thing. And suddenly I feel like these are all my friends, you know? There's no difference. Anyway, just wanted to throw that in there to add another thought.
Okay,
So,
so I'm just speaking because also I don't know if this could be like a Zoom thing there where we say like, okay, how like could we set up the classes and this, which we could roughly do. But I don't know how all of you in this group or the people who are listening are up into like homework. To literally say like, for example, Alicia says that like what really interests me is like how could we make a class description which speaks to the caregiver, but it's also sounding nice enough for the person participating, which could be a group. Or secondly, then like really just thinking about like, okay, what's the curriculum? What do we do in class? You know, or if I mean, it could be like a second thing we could invest some time in, because I don't know if this should be like, well, what is your feeling? Should we sit here and say like in the call, hey, I think this and this and this, or should we rather do this like in like a work session by ourselves, or like in a shared Google Doc, which I could provide for the groups? What's your feeling on that?
I feel like there's like talking about an exercise is going to be better than doing it in a Google Doc, just because I feel like if somebody's explaining one to me or written it down, I'm going to have a lot of questions and like, how did this land? Like, I feel like it's going to be less homework to do it together online. Or maybe each person comes in with one or two sort of exercises or things that they felt were really successful. And even could lead the group through it in like a mini version, or and then talk about it and how it works with kids or blah, blah, blah. But like thinking of like best practices, like finding the best practices, not best practices around the system, but what are the ones, what really works, and how do we, you know, and then if it's not working, like, I mean, that's one thing with the Laban work, what we learn to approach it in so many different ways, that if it's not working in the verbal area, maybe we can do it in a movement area, maybe we can talk about it or write about it or draw about it, like just finding different modes to enter those points, entrance points into what the thing is.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else?
I think before we even get there, I'm just kind of curious. I like my brain wants to pull from so many activities because I think that's a good idea. When you said we all came back whenever we meet next with 2 activities to share in over a conversation, that'd be great. But I'm wondering what our theme is. I know we talked about Hello Body and like kids getting connected. I know we've also talked about anti-bullying. We've talked a little bit about families. Just trying to figure out like where out of all of that are we looking exactly to go?
Good point.
I feel like what initially what me and Florian had talked about was, oh, if I had had these somatic tools as a kid, and actually I did have quite a lot of them, so they certainly have helped me, but like what is important and at what age do we want? So I think coming in with like with really these tools, like if we start to be able to be in our body a little bit, or start to recognize what we're feeling, or have words or language around sensation, then how we engage in any situation is going to be different. So I feel like the basic maybe tools for resilience, in which, I mean, we need the family buy-in, we want the anti-bullying, like these are outer cells maybe, but I feel like the work within that is really about coming to a sense of self and a sense of body. Is about somatic practice for kids, and how do we sell that to them, that's that second point of like entryway. How did we get them in? So maybe that's, I don't know, that's my thought, but it could be different for other people.
What do you think, if I may just jump on that, what do you think if we work together on a concept with like the goal of what Laura is just like saying, just like we call it the Hello Body course, like a starter course into somatic approaches to your own body and to movement. And if I then want to tailor this in the direction of anti-bullying, and it would probably wouldn't be anyhow so many changes, you know, or if somebody else wants to use it more for like a group which might be a bit older, like we could like adapt this, you know, but we could think about a core of like, and whatever each of us, or like, and it's supposed to be open source, so whoever sees this or whoever finds this somewhere later in the somatic video universe, feel free to adapt it to your use, you know. Yeah, what do you think of this approach?
That sounds good. And I think like what we can do is come in with, okay, these are the people I think I'm going to be working with, but you can be thinking about this exercise, how you would adapt it for little kid, you know, for 5-year-olds, or how this is going to work for teens. Because I think a lot of the tools are the same tools. It's not a vastly different exercise depending on the age. The entry point and the modes of, you know, entertainment to get them in, or whatever it is, or, you know, presence.
Framing, basically, maybe.
That?
The framing?
Yeah, the framework. Yeah, the framework is going to be slightly different. But the other thing I was thinking is like, so if we worked on a couple of things, one is what are the benefits? And let's say it is Hello Body. Like the Hello Body. What is it? What is it to be in a body? But like we could say the buy-in, people will be better athletes. They'll be better dancers. They'll be less clumsy. They're going to have better spatial awareness. They're going to be, you know, I mean, those are the outer things. I feel like there are outer reasons, and then there are inner reasons. And for us, probably the inner reasons are the most important. But I think to the general public, the outer reasons are going to be more important. So if we kind of had lists of benefits, which we can all think about, you know, and maybe if we try to bring that back, like even like just 3 or 4 things, and then 1 or 2 exercises of like, this is what I would do in the beginning, or start to lay out a structure. Like, okay, we've all come into a classroom. How the classroom makes a difference. Like, are we sitting in a circle? Is it, you know, like that's going to be a different entrance than a regular classroom? Or are we like in a studio that has no anything, and we just let people land however they land, wherever they land? And that, you know, how we enter the space, and how we call people in and invite and offer, as opposed to force and, you know, control. Which I think that's what somatics is. It's like the invitation and the offering and the inquiry, as opposed to it's like this and you have to do it like that.
Yeah, I like this a lot. And then also like with on a second step, we could really go back to, for example, something Alicia just mentioned, which is like super worthy. I think it's like just like making it a bit longer, because the kids want to show you their beautiful empty bottle, you know, or their teddy bear, and yeah, whatever they have, you know, just like what do we have to be aware of? And I mean, Cassie can speak here of like a very different age group also, which could be like very worthy for people to see, because like also not everybody who has the probably luxury to prepare in such a group over such a process in working in such a group. Laura, I think you also said that once you just were asked, and there is just this like group that you will have to work with, you know, and to find some resources about like what can be good, what can be done, what works, what to be aware of.
Yeah, and I think that idea of time, like usually with Zoom, I'm like, make it as short as possible. But then if we think of that, we don't need to be staring at the screen the whole time that the Zoom's on. Like maybe it's 2 hours, but now you're going to go around your house and you're going to find something. Or if it's in a bigger group, you have the breakout time. You're going to get together in small groups. Like when I teach Laban, I'm always breaking everybody up. I try to do as little work as possible and make them do the work and then show everybody. And then we talk about it. So it's like, you know, here's the construction. Here's the thing you're going to make. Here's the experience you're going to have. Here's the creative moment. But having lots and lots of space for people to just be people, right? For kids to just be kids, for them to show up with, when I see my clients, I always ask, my first question is, what's going on in your body? You know? And then they can answer that in any way they want to answer that. But usually, like, what I really want to hear is what's happening inside. But a lot of times they'll say, well, this is going on because of that, or, you know, the outside comes in too. But just sort of starting to maybe create this relationship of inner outer with that language.
Just making some notes on this.
Yeah, I feel like if the goal is to create, you know, come together, do the exercises in the next session, and then create just a guideline, a structure, just to get stuff down and get the thing going. I think that that's a really good goal for the near future. And then I think once you have that, it can shape and evolve if you want to create a sector, you know, for the young population, and then, you know, 10 to 12 and then teen. I think that that's a really good starting point. And it just sounds like it'll help bring everything into this like nucleus position, and then it can expand out as it needs to. I actually have to jump off because I have another meeting, but
All right.
this was so interesting, and it was so great to meet Alicia and Florian, meet both of you.
I'm so glad you could come.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me know about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm additionally making some notes to this in our Google Doc we're having. And what I just like put down for now is that we want to design a framework for a course with like the basic toolkits that we can adapt it to age groups and different frameworks. And for now, I just put it down, like we want to think about 4 sessions in the frame of a month to give time for integration, and also seeing how the process is evolving and which feedback is coming in this time. And do kids still come? Do they bring their friends? Do they bring their siblings?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's weird. It's like, I feel like what we're trying to do is teach a new language to the world, right? Like just coming in for I mean, it's amazing like how we can live our lives with so few people actually knowing what we do or having any relationship to what that is. So like, how do we like get the you know, it's like, oh, we just want to make this bigger, and spreading it will only help people, you know, in the free thinking, open-minded world. But fundamentally, for fundamentalists, may be very dangerous. You know.
Yeah.
I also have a call coming up, but yeah, I think I have a couple of practices in mind that can be adapted that I'm excited to share with you all. I definitely think I know what everyone's niches are that can put something together. It's so great to hear
Cool.
everybody's perspectives and everyone who's not with us today too, some of the stuff they've shared. Yeah, I'm excited to put this together with both of you, and are we meeting next Wednesday?
I think so, right?
Yeah. So next
Okay.
Wednesday we'll come together. Everyone brings it. We can write it just even in one of the things. Come, and if you want, you can bring these ideas and maybe think of what are the benefits so that we can put this together. Like so people don't have to go all the way to the Google document, right? Like just write that this is what it's about. Yeah.
Okay.
It's hard as the doc gets longer. It's harder to go through and figure out where you're at.
Even my own notes.
I know, I'm the same way, but I'll have some feedback about Zoom and large groups of children after this weekend. And yeah, I'll see everyone Wednesday.
Great. Thanks, Alicia.
You're welcome. Bye, everyone.
Okay, so now it's down to me and Florian, and I am going to stop recording.